Well, good evening, church family. I want to thank you for joining us for our February prayer emphasis for our missionaries. We call it News from the Field. Well, tonight we'll be hearing from Tom and Carolyn Pace, our missionaries to Peru. Tom and Carolyn are currently in Pensacola, Florida, getting ready to return to Peru. They were stateside not only for a furlough, but to be with their daughter and family before she passed away from cancer. We obviously need to be continuing to pray for them and their daughter's family. It has been a privilege to be a part of this couple's ministry almost from the beginning. That's nearly 50 years. So, let's join the interview now. Well, good evening, Tri-County family. Thank you again for joining us tonight during our February emphasis of News from the Field. Tonight, we have with us Tom and Carolyn Pace. They have been longtime missionaries in the family of Tri-County Baptist Church, and we are looking forward to hearing what God is doing, has been doing, and what they hope will be doing in the future. And as has been with every one of our missionaries, we'll obviously be talking about how COVID has impacted ministry for them, unique to their field over this last year, but how it's continuing to have its influence into the months to come and how they're working to respond to that. And so I'll quit talking now and we'll hand things over to Tom and Carolyn. Again, Tom, thanks for joining us tonight. Go ahead and begin sharing with what God's been doing for you all.
Thanks, Pastor Brian. It is a real privilege to be here. Carol and I have been in Peru for 53 years. Is that right? 53 years in Peru. And during most of that time, Tri-County has been one of our major supporters and faithfully working in the ministry alongside of us. So that's a real blessing. Carol and I grew up in Albuquerque. I'm from Texas and she's from New Mexico. We grew up, our families were friends. And I want to just put a word in here so that for the teenagers and the younger people in the church, that just so you know how things have changed. Our parents at that time made us wait 16 years to get married. I wanted to marry this young lady, but our parents made us wait for 16 years. Can you imagine that? 16 long years. But then when Carolyn turned 17, they finally gave us permission and we got married. So we met it really in the nursery of the Baptist Church in Albuquerque and got married when Carolyn was a senior in high school. So that first year of marriage, I had to sign her report cards. Her grades went up and we've been hanging out together since then. And the Lord called us. We went to Laternal College in East Texas. It's now Laternal University. It's primarily an engineering school, but that's where I came to know Christ. And that's also where Carolyn was converted to Christ. And the next day after I was saved, I went and changed my major from mechanics or mechanical technology to missions and to a special program that Laternal had at that time. And then the Lord called us both to Peru, where we've had the privilege of trying to rest in what we have engraved in our wedding rings. Oh, magnify the Lord with me. Let us exalt his name together. We spent 17 years up in the Andes Mountains. A good part of that time we had to drive over 16,000 feet over the Andes down into a valley at 11,000. That's where we raised our family. When we left the United States, we had one little 6-month-old Texan, or Texican, and then we have 4 more children born in Peru. And it's been our privilege to serve in different types of ministries there. We were planning on staying up in the Andes for the rest of our life. That was our original plan. We were the only missionaries in the province we lived in. Many towns, dozens of towns. So we had plenty to do, but the Lord began to speak to us about moving down to Lima. And he spoke to Carolyn first, and then he spoke to me through her, I guess you might say, because I had no intention of leaving the mountains. Now, I'll tell you why. I could go on visitation out to one of the villages, and I'd take my Bible and my fishing rod. And I'd hope the people wouldn't be home, so I'd have a chance to catch a few trout. And that's an idea of why I like the mountains so much. But we enjoyed the people there. But then God called us to Lima, which is a great big city, 10 million people, and just a typical city that right now is shut down, locked down still because of the coronavirus. Now, I'd like for Carolyn to tell a little bit about what happened when we moved to Lima.
When we moved to Lima, because Tom didn't want to start a church there, because he knew if we started a church there, we would have to stay. And the idea was when the last one of our kids graduated from high school, we would go back up to the mountains. So he was doing Bible conferences in different places, different cities around the country. But I was at home, and the kids were in a children's school, a missionary children's school. So I didn't have anything to do. And I just started praying, Lord, please, I've got to have something to do. We weren't involved in a church. We were supposed to get involved in some church to help a Peruvian pastor, but that just wasn't working out. And so I just was really praying that the Lord would help me have something to do. One day, a new friend of mine was over, and she said, I asked her how she had come to know the Lord, and she was telling me. And she said that she, at the beginning, was very interested in sharing the gospel with her friends. And they were interested, but when she would take them to church, they were not interested anymore, because it was a lower middle class church. And she was from the higher middle class, and the distinction is very noticeable. And so she quit talking to her friends about the Lord. Well, about 12 years had gone by, and she said that the Lord had begun to speak to her about sharing the gospel again with her friends. She kind of wanted to start a Bible study, but she didn't want to teach it. She didn't feel like she could. And I said, Juana, I want to do a Bible study, but I don't have any friends yet here. So we got together and started. She would invite her friends, and I would do a Bible study. In a little while, several of the ladies came to know the Lord. And then they started saying, what can we do? What about our husbands? What about our kids? So then what?
So then we felt like, well, if the Lord is opening this door, we better be ready to go through it. So we started a family Bible study on Sunday afternoons. And we're talking about, these are people who live more or less like Americans. They call them upper middle class. They're business and professional people primarily. And they live more or less like your average American. They all have cars, they have nice homes, and most of the conveniences that we have in the United States. But we were totally surprised when we found out these strong Catholic people were interested in the Bible, but they wouldn't cross the social lines into a poor area of Lima to go to church, because their maids might go to church there, or their gardeners, but there was some social pride there, cultural pride. And we found out they were really open to the Bible. And it wasn't too long before we had 100 people in our living rooms on Sunday. And so I tell everybody, this is the church that Carolyn started. And all the ones that I started in the mountains were all much smaller. And this one grew to over 600. And of course, they bought land and built a building. And we were dealing every week with a lot of teachers, engineers, for some reason, unusual number of lawyers. We usually have about 20 lawyers who are members of the church, Supreme Court judge, a federal court judge, just quite a variety. And I'm not really athletic at all, but we have an unusual number of athletes, even world-class athletes. One of our Peruvian pastors now was the world champion high jumper in the Masters when he turned 70 years old. He's the same age I am. And several years ago, he won world championship in high jumping. And we have people that, the motocross champion for South America is a member of the church. Now he's one of our missionaries. And then the church got the vision for missions. Now, this to me is the key thing as missionaries. We never dreamed, and we probably made some huge mistakes in years gone by not emphasizing our newly planted churches, emphasizing missions. So when we started in Lima, the very first Sunday we announced that we would, there are no expenses because we're meeting in our living room, but it's very biblical to take up an offering. And what are we going to do with the offering? And these were Roman Catholic people we're talking about. And I suggested that we help a missionary. Now, they had heard of missions because they have priests who are missionaries. And they said that'd be great. So we chose a man from the church who wasn't even a Christian, but he was our treasurer. And we started taking up a missions offering. And every single service from that time, about 30 years ago, every single service would mention a missionary and pray for missionaries. And what it created was an atmosphere for missions. And God began to call Peruvians to go to difficult areas. And I mean difficult areas. We have a young lady, a medical doctor from up in the mountains. She lives in Iraq and works on the border between Iraq and Turkey with the Kurdish people. We have a young mountain family, 2 children are working in Morocco. We have another couple that they met on the internet. She's from Brazil and he's from a church in Lima. They're missionaries in Mozambique and Africa. Then we have a young couple who are teachers in our Christian school, and that God called them to Germany, but to work with Muslims, the immigrants from North Africa who are moving in huge numbers into Germany, and they're planting a church there. Then we have, my secretary, when she'd make a mistake, we would tease her and say, now, Carmen, if you don't get straightened out, we're going to send you off to India. And then the Lord called her to India. So she worked as a missionary in India for several years, and now she's a missionary in Bangladesh. Then we have a lady who's working in Nepal, also two families in Ecuador, one family working with the deaf, and another family starting a church in Ecuador. And let me just tell you one little story about Peruvian missions. Now we're talking about on the mission field, we're talking about in Latin America. The people are not rich, they get along, they do well, and they're learning to trust the Lord. We got together with the deacons when the church was up around 500 by then, and decided that we should trust God as a church. We told them every year, let's do a faith promise, and you trust God to provide for you so that you can give to missions. But what about the church as a church? So we decided to have a faith month, and we chose the month of November to be our missions month every year. And the idea was the church would give everything that came in, tithes, offerings, and no matter what offering it was, every cent that came in during the month of November went to our missionaries. Now we had about 10 people on the payroll by then, and had lights and water and keep maintenance on the building, security, many, many other things. But we made that step of faith. And so we didn't announce it to the church yet, just the deacons knew about it. And we got to think, well, how are we going to pay for the expenses of the church if we give everything to missions? On Wednesday night, before I announced it on Sunday, a couple came in looking for the treasurer, and they had some money. They had sold a house and they were downsizing. They were retired and were downsizing to an apartment. They sold their house. I don't know if it was a tithe from the sale or what it was, but they handed us a check for $18,000 on a Wednesday night. And that was enough money to pay all the expenses of the church for the whole month of November. When our people saw that and heard about it, they really stepped out on faith. So we're excited about missions in another area. Our mission churches sending missionaries out, especially to the Muslim countries. And I think that's the future of the missions to Muslims is from Latin America, not from the United States. And then Carolyn, tell us, we know that you were a teacher for many years. You homeschooled, we homeschooled our kids. I say we, she did all the work. I was there. And then we moved to Lima and you taught in the school there. And I think she's retired at least 3 times. Our son is the director of the school, Andy Pace. Tell us something about La Molina Christian Schools.
Well, a lot of the people, when the church was established, and they were saying, please, we need a Christian school. Our kids are being, they're being bothered at school because they don't want to participate in the required religion class. And if they opt out, that's a problem. But if they don't do everything that's required, then they fail the class. If they don't go to mass once a week, if they don't do confirmation and all of the other things that they have to do, they fail the class. We need a Christian school. And so it took us a long time to get around to doing that. But the Lord opened the door and we started working and established a Christian school. We had 18 kids the first year, but today we have over 300. Now with the pandemic, that is a huge problem because of course they have to do it online. And we have preschool, grade school, and high school. We also have a desire to have a Christian university, but of course that's future. So we just need a lot of prayer for our Christian school.
The Lord's provided a great building, but it can't be used right now. It's just sitting there. New building, beautiful. And right now we can't use it because of the coronavirus. But that's a prayer request, as is around the world, that God will keep these doors open. And if we could, Brother Brian, mention some prayer requests and also some praises. There are so many doors open. And one more that I want Carolyn to tell you about is exciting, and you can help us pray about it.
I had another friend that got me involved in something that I never, ever dreamed about. The municipal government of our district has a ministry. It's not a ministry, but that's what it is, to the senior citizens. Of course, they're not Christian. It's all very Catholic, but they have activities for senior citizens. You have to live in our area, have to be over 65 to participate in this. They offer 40 different classes: English, computer, dancing, music, all of these different things. And she wanted to go and do a Bible class. This is a secular system, but we decided to try and we got involved in this. And right now there are thousands of people that have come down from the mountains. Now, this is a different area of this same ministry, but they've come down from the mountains and they are illiterate. They've never been able to go to school. So through this initial contact with these people there with the seniors, we are now involved in 10 literacy classes. And we go to these classes and we teach a Bible class and then have published the Gospels, the 4 Gospels, and we use that for them to practice their skills, the things that they're just learning. So they're reading through the Gospels. Right now, we're in chapter 25 of the Gospel of Matthew. That's how far we go. Now, we're doing that right now online. We're continuing, not with all of those classes, but with at least one of those.
another exciting ministry that we're looking forward to going back. We're in Pensacola, Florida right now, and our kids started a church for the English-speaking community in Lima. You can imagine a city of 10 million, a very busy place, and there are people from all over the world, but English is the common factor there. So our son and daughter-in-law and our daughter and son-in-law, who are also missionaries in Peru, started an English-speaking church. Now, I'm officially the pastor of the English church. We have people from the embassy and from different companies. And to me, it's totally new because I was never a pastor in the States. We came straight to Peru from college. And so now I'm having to prepare sermons in English for the first time. But it's an exciting thing, a difficult thing, but pray with us because these people have a lot of influence and a lot can be done. They're only there usually for 2 years and then they go to another country. If we can get them grounded in the gospel and grounded in missions, I believe there'll be a blessing to many other countries also. And a prayer request is for the English church and for La Molina Christian School and the need for American teachers. Every semester, every year, we have to recruit new teachers from the States to teach in Peru. If you're a teacher and you're interested, get in touch with us and we're glad to have you come to Peru to teach. And then another prayer request, we're here in the States primarily because our daughter, Kathy Anderson, her husband is Rick, was sick last year in Peru. She had cancer. They thought they got it all. When they came back to start their furlough, they discovered that the cancer had come back also, and it was all widespread in her body. Anyway, Kathy went to be with the Lord in October 28th, and Rick is still here. He plans to go back to Peru. Their 4 daughters are here with us. We live just across the street from them, near the college. And so if you pray for the Andersons, Rick and his 4 daughters, 2 of them graduate this semester, and one with a master's degree, another with a bachelor's degree, and the other 2 are different stages studying. So pray for the Anderson family, and also the new rules in Peru that a complete lockdown. You can no longer use your personal car. Only one person can leave the house per family, and then they have to go buy groceries or whatever. And people over 65 are not supposed to leave their house at all unless they have to go to the doctor or to a pharmacy. So it is still a complete lockdown, very strict. So pray for us. We'd like to get back to Peru soon, but we have some medical problems here we have to get straightened out. So we appreciate your prayer. Thank you for standing behind us all these years. It's a privilege to be partners in ministry with Tri-County Baptist Church. Thank you, Brother Brian.
Thank you so much. Well, Tom and Carolyn, I appreciate the report. I thank you for the prayer points that you've given us to come alongside and intercede for you. You know, one of the things that I really appreciate that we've been hearing from our missionaries is an aspect of perspective. Just to be transparent, you know, a lot of Americans are really frustrated with the level of restriction that we have on our life. But when you put it into the context of what so many other countries have and the level of restriction that they have, we actually have a high level of freedom and movement here in the United States. And so I think it puts our complaining spirit into perspective, realigns us to where we should be. God has a lot to say about complaining, especially through the book of Deuteronomy. And so I really appreciate that. You guys have been such a blessing. I'm going to ask you to hang on here. We're going to stop recording in just a moment, but I just want to visit with you personally just for a little bit. So to our church family, as is our pattern, we're going to give you about 3 minutes or so. We're going to provide some prayer slides that have these points on them. Take some time as a family just to gather around the TV, the computer, the tablet, wherever you're at. take some time to pray. Make sure you get those kids involved in praying also. And then we'll be back for just a very quick goodbye. And again, we really appreciate our mission family helping us help and minister to them by using this new format of Zoom. Matter of fact, I really do believe that because of COVID, we're going to see this as a regular part of church ministries from now on, instead of waiting for somebody to come back, 3, 4, 5 years later, being able to regularly connect with our missionaries through this paradigm of communication. So again, go ahead and go into that prayer time together, church family, and then I'll come back with just a very quick goodbye to you all. Again, thank you for being with us. We hope this was a blessing to your heart. Join us next week as we hear more news from the field. But until then, have a blessed day.